Welcome everybody, colleagues. Let us start our event. Today I'm happy to welcome everybody on the discussion what prevents cities from effectively attracting donors' money for recovery. And there is an analytical note after speaking with representatives of communities and donors, and the results, achievements of this note will be presented to you by Maxim Samaluk from Center of Economic Strategy. And also we have invited some speakers who are working with donors' money. And also we invited Artem Shevalev, the Deputy Executive Director in EBRD, so he could comment on that. This event is one of the activities within Economic Hub project, the efficient policy of economic management in GROW realized with assistance of UK government. A question to issues. Questions to issues you may leave in Q&A during the Q&A or in chat, and they will be resent to us. And you may put it in your questions to the speakers in chat. I will facilitate the event. I am Deputy Executive Director of CE is Maria Repko, and Mykhailyna Skoryk-Shkarivska, Director of the non-governmental organization Sustainable Development of Communities, and also Deputy Mayor of Bucha town in 21-22, and Aleksandra Sladkova, the Director of Economic Development in Lviv City Mayorship. And also we expect for a representative of Mykolaiv city. Artem Shevalev, Deputy Economic Director of Ukraine's EBRD, already joined us. Unfortunately, colleagues from the Ministry of Recovery couldn't join us, although we promise we shall submit them everything which will be pronounced today in the panel. If you have some questions, Ministry of Recovery could answer. You think we have no representatives of the Ministry of Recovery today, so it's not worth putting these questions now. That is kind of an internal discussion today. I give the floor to Maxim. Maxim, please talk about your research. What have you known? Welcome, colleagues. Let me share my stream. Today, I'll briefly show the results of our researches on the absorption capacity of the communities. What challenges are there? What could be done? Basically, what is one of the main problems in recovery? Ukrainian cities, towns have. Ukraine will need billions of dollars for reconstruction. During and after the war, the places, the cities which physically haven't been damaged, haven't suffered, so haven't been under occupation, but anyways, they need resources to host IDPs, to care about veterans. Obviously, there are also cities who have physically been destroyed and damaged, have to rebuild their infrastructure from zero. So Ukraine requires huge resources, and the significant role in the financing obviously will belong to international donors. But the issue now is that even when we'll have those funds, those finances for recovery, there's a problem of how to spend those resources, utilize them with quality. That is the issue of absorption capacity. Absorptive capacity is the ability of cities to attract and efficiently use funds. And from that, how good quality will be, with good quality will they work with the donors and will receive and process the resources incoming. The quality and speed of after-war recovery will depend upon that. This issue is very important when discussing foreign aid and foreign loans. The donors pay attention to whether the cities will be able to utilize this aid, how much efficiently are they doing it, and they draw conclusions on further cooperation. So it's very important. And there is a limit of absorptive capacity, upon reaching which the efficiency of the recipient's use of aid rapidly decreases. So even when certain city will be given very much money, not always will it be possible to use this money efficiently for everybody. We have to understand the absorption capacity depends not only on the recipient, but also on the donor. Certain problems, certain issues are arising on the side of donor, but our task, first of all, is to help Ukrainian cities to cope with that and to help them to improve this efficiency and to work with donors more efficiently. The international experience, we have studied it, notwithstanding the context of different countries is obviously different. There are some basic problems in implementation of international projects are rather similar. And they can arise both on the side of the donor, MFIs, aid agencies, etc., and on the side of the recipient. In the case of our study, those are the towns or the small cities. We identified the key problems that may arise after analyzing the international experience of project implementation. Those are the problems other countries have encountered during recovery after wars, after natural catastrophes, and simply during realization of projects connected to a transition to market economy. What prevents, what obstacles to efficiently realize those projects? Briefly about what can arise on the side of the donor. Usually those are some misunderstanding when the relationships haven't been built up properly between the donor and the recipient. Sometimes donors have their own vision about the projects to be implemented. And that vision not always can match with the real needs. Sometimes the donors might not be well aware of the local context. They have no sufficient expertise. They may have overcomplicated program procedures, other features. They may compete about the projects, for the projects, not coordinating the activity between themselves. It's not a great problem in Ukraine because the needs are so huge. There will be sufficient work for everybody. Sometimes there are delays with payment of tranches of finances. On the side of the recipient, what obstacles for absorption can be? First of all, political, military, and economic instability in the country, high risk of cooperating with this country, recipient country. Insufficient government support can be there. If one recipient is proactive, is attracted the aid, but the government may hinder that process. Obviously, corruption is a problem and an obstacle both at local and at governmental level. If the projects are not sufficiently clear and the goals, the objectives of the projects are blurred, it also can object. And if the projects are multi-purposed and not coordinated, it also may be a problem. Also, not to forget about organizational capacity of the recipients. How are they organizationally ready to cooperate with the donors, to communicate with them, to comply with all the requirements and to utilize efficiently the resources provided? What we did within this research as regards absorption capacity, we conducted an overall review of success of previous international projects to understand the state of affairs, how much efficiently Ukraine is managing the resources it obtains. Also, we conducted a number of interviews with the representative of donors and cities to understand what problems with international experience are relevant in Ukraine. Now, briefly, what is the state of affairs with the success of absorption of international aid projects in Ukraine? We'll tell at once that these conclusions shouldn't be interpreted as a review of, as an absolute review and complete review of what happens in Ukraine. If certain city has a history of realization of projects with delays or a failure in the sense of absorptive capacity, it doesn't mean that all the other projects of this city are a failure. Also, we are talking about absorption capacity. Certain project might have been implemented, but the time spent for realization of this project was so prolonged, so delayed. And the projects which were arising during the realization were so large, then it's difficult to talk about the overall success of the project. So we managed to analyze 15 projects for different years. From those, 6 could be believed successful from the point of view of absorption capacity, 7 have been realized with certain delay, and 2 of them were not successful from the point of view of absorption capacity. What has been main reasons or of success or non-success in these cases? First of all, non-due organizational and financial provision of the projects, a very long agreement, very long concordation with international organization of tender documentation, delays with contracts execution, and also agreement on that. There have been also some obstacles by state organization like Ukrdrž expertise, state building expertise of Ukraine. They have changed the requirements for a building so often that additional assistance by the donor was required. What conclusion do we draw from that? There is a problem with absorption capacity in Ukraine. Worth to pay attention at. And we did it. We interviewed different cities and different donors. And we confirmed or disproved the conclusions of international experience and of the analysis of the previous projects. What have we known? The most successful is implementation of project in the case when the city has political will for cooperation and institutional capacity. If there is a political will for cooperation, then certain technical obstacles could be overcome easily. The donors are always open for assistance. They provide support. And in case the city is proactively cooperating, looking for international financing sources and finds internal forces, internal efforts to cope with the obstacles, then the projects, even in case the city needs some support, are able to be realized successfully. And there is also institutional capacities, availability of the sufficiently trained personnel be able to negotiate with the donor to coordinate the course of the project to realize it successfully. A failure of the project is when the city or the mayor of the city has no political will for cooperation, or when the structure of the project becomes too complicated. For example, a certain municipal company, municipal enterprise in the city may have a wish, may have certain ideas how to solve the problems, but if the top management of the city has no proactive wish to cooperate, then it will impair the capacities and the success of projects realization institutionally. Sometimes the projects become overcomplicated and the cities have the cities have no possibility to implement them and to cooperate successfully with the donors. What are the main problems? What is most difficult for the cities? It is the setup of the budgets and to adapt them to work with the donors. First of all, smaller cities which have a less experience and history of cooperation. Such cities as Lviv, Kiev, large metropolis of Ukraine have already many lessons learned and much of experience. So to cooperate with donors much easier, although there are also problems arising sometimes, but a great number of new cities, smaller cities and towns are for the first time now approaching this cooperation with donors. They don't yet have this institutional capacity for cooperation with international donors. So to efficiently implement the projects. As regards the problems of international experience, such the following of them were arising in Ukraine on the side of donors, that is the relationships between the donor and the recipient, conflict or difference of interest, and the complex donor program procedures, too complicated procedures. For the cities, as I already mentioned, which are for the first time starting cooperation, it's difficult for them to understand the procedures and they don't have sufficient capacity to implement them. Also, there's a problem of insufficient coordination between donors. Sometimes it may be improved when more actively implementing recovery projects, and also a lack or deficit of grant programs, because many programs are loans, not grants, and it complicates for the cities the process of receiving such aid. And for the second, it's additional burden for further financing, for further payout of these loans and return of this money. And main problems on the side of the recipient, first of all, political, economic, and military instability of Ukraine. This risk will stay with us to the end of the war. We may just try to decrease it by implementing insurance of military risks. It doesn't depend directly on the cities, but they also can cooperate, can participate in minimizing those risks. A significant problem is a lack of political will or this desire to cooperate with donors. It's a political story. Bureaucratization of the processes, insufficient institutional capacity, insufficient technical skills of a recipient employees. The cities and the donors have noted that it's easy for them to communicate directly. For example, when there is a government intermediary which interferes, it also creates certain problems and complicates the cooperation. And the corruption also, obviously. If the cities have certain corruption history, the donors pay attention to that. Notwithstanding, at certain additional cases, not always they do prove to availability of large problems generally in this city or in the country as a whole. The corruption history is paid attention, and it is unfortunately also a hinder for cooperation. How the absorption capacity could be improved? We have written a lot about it in our research, in our study. You may see at the website of Center for Economic Strategy. Now, briefly, talking about how could it be improved. First of all, by improving normative and legal regulation, regulatory and legal regulation. During the interview, it was said that as of March, for example, the topical problem have been with the resolution 590, which hindered cities in using their resources, and there have been other problems, other legislative proposals, which we have described in detail in our report. So to improve this institutional capacity of the cities, it will be reasonable to organize training courses for the representatives of the cities and communities, for them for how they could better cooperate with the donors. What could they do otherwise to improve that? Such a details are they in our report as well. It's possible always to develop PPPs and concessions, which would facilitate the work with international financing. On the side of donors, it's possible to initiate donors program to engage specifically smaller cities and communities to improve the access of small cities, small towns to such finance. And also it's possible to involve the cities to centralized implementation of projects. And also grant funding we advocate for not only at the level of the cities, but also the level of the country, because international grant funding will ease a lot further recovery and will reduce the risks arising during the debt burden of Ukraine. That's all from my side now. Thank you. And I give the floor to Maria. Thank you very much, Maxim, for the description of our research and also for doing that research. I have been in a couple of interviews during the research. It's really very interesting. And what donors said, they said that in the cities where there is some smell of corruption, the donors don't go there. They don't want to see evidence or disapproval of that there is no corruption. They simply don't go there, and the dialogue is very interesting. And I hope that our event will continuation of such a dialogue. This study was conducted half a year ago. Now many cities have more experience in cooperation with the donors for recovery projects and for management of such donors projects and funds and monies. We have Mykolaiv, Bucha, and Lviv in connection with us now. I see there are many representatives who have shown up in the chat. I see the question from Cherkiv. I know Trostanet is there. I see Vinnytsia there. Colleagues, if you'd like to comment something, a couple of minutes to voice up with some comment on your experience, I ask you to write in the chat to CES office. You see in the chat, and they will allow you to unmute to comment at a certain point of time. The presentations, the researches, and the materials are available on the website of the Center of Economic Strategy and also on our Facebook and our Telegram channels. We have many different media where we do publish everything, but the primary source is the website. And in the chat, my colleagues have put a link for the website where the research is available and where the video record of today's event will also be posted. Now let us start to discuss. I invite Oleksandr Senkevich, Mayor of Mykolaiv City, for the discussion. We have such a selection of speakers. Mykolaiv is a front border in the southern city. Lviv is from the back regions, and Bucha was under occupation. It's a little small towns. So very interesting and different points of view and opinions will be exposed today. Aleksandra, if you are in connection and everything is good, I ask you now to participate. Yes, we hear you very well. Thank you. Please tell about your experience of cooperation, absorption. What are your cases? We do feel ourselves, first of all, like pioneers in this area. Obviously, before the full-scale invasion, we have been cooperating with different towns. We were launching brotherhoods, but it was more connected with intercultural cooperation or with some projects to finance. We were ashamed of asking the aid, but after the full-scale invasion, we started to search for the partners in different countries Sometimes people will helping us who have left Mykolaiv with a very active civil position, and they have approached the localities they have lived upon with the proposal to sign a petition. That is how we become brother cities with some cities or towns of France, Germany, even Norway. And we found partners there. As regards our example, after the next shelling of our city, President Zelensky addressed to Norwegian parliament. And like we say in English, Denmark adopted the city of Mykolaiv. Obviously, it's easy for us to cooperate with Denmark. It is a very constructive partner, also a little bit more dramatic, more bureaucratic. Before our first meeting with Danish representatives, I thought Ukraine is a bureaucratic country, but the Danish are winning over us in bureaucracy. There is no recipe of cooperation. We have a steering committee with participation of Danish government and the Ministry of Recovery. And during these steering committees meetings, we discuss our cooperation and the use of the assistance. From the very first day of our talking with Denmark, I was saying Mykolaiv needs projects. Mykolaiv needs pipes, windows, but we don't want to work with the monies of our donors or our brother. They have the right to decide how to use and to control that money. We can together control that money, but not to spend them. And they like it very much. They like very much our approach. And it is positively influencing any decision taken. So we take many efforts to optimize those processes. Last year, it was going about more tactical issues like access to water supplies, the launch of heating system. Mykolaiv has not yet the centralized water supplies since 12th of April 2022. We are working today also on more strategic issues like creation of a general plan, of a master plan of Mykolaiv city recovery plan. And also we have projects concerning recovery using the principle build back. The key is communication control. We are thankful to our partners and who have visited our city. The ambassador of Denmark was here. We are now setting up a website for transparency where all the materials used could be checked, verified. We conduct a strict account for all that, and also we may recommend methods and guidelines to be used by other cities in cooperation with the partners. The major role is played here by the Embassy of Denmark and personally Mr. Ambassador Ole Intervikerson, who became very fond with Mykolaiv city, and we may share best practices of cooperation. Thank you very much. Very interesting story and a lot of hearts from me to Denmark. I don't know whether somebody from Denmark is listening to us, but they will be recorded. I thank very much Denmark for the support, and also special thanks for the many guidelines of cooperation. I believe this initiative will be very useful. And as a key for organization, we would like to see such a website of yours. We have very little access now generally to such information. Thank you very much, Alexander. And now I want to switch to a smaller city. A bigger city, Mykolaiv, was adopted by a foreign country. Has somebody adopted Bucha? Have been some specific problems relevant for a small community, which Mykolaiv was not having? I asked Mykhailyna to share Bucha's experience with us. Just a second, Mykhailyna is out of Zoom, or colleagues. Let us just wait a minute. There's technical problems with Mykhailyna's connection. I see technical questions in chat. After the colleagues will speak, we'll have a couple of circles of questions. And the questions about civil society organizations and PPPs. Please put your questions to chat, put your comments. I see people with experience of attraction of funds, partnership and project, and also experience of monitoring such projects are here. So I invite you to be active, and we shall then prepare the summary of this event, and we shall share it with the public, with the ministry. I see Mykhailyna already joined. Mykhailyna, are you in connection? I hope I'm in connection. I hope you are here and you hear me. Yes, we hear you. We are happy to see you. Please tell us. We already listened from Mykolaiv, a large front borderline city. What style of cooperation with foreign donors they do use? Now, Bucha is well known for the tragedy which happens due to Russia's, but it is generally a small city, small community. Can you tell your experience how to do efficiently cooperation with donors, how to attract monies for recovery, how to implement projects? Yes, we really are very happy about Mykolaiv, and we have started the experience because also consultants from Kyiv Oblast have been attracted who were dropped into Bucha when going from Mykolaiv to Kyiv, and we asked them how you cooperate with Red Cross and other organizations working in Mykolaiv and Kyiv Oblast and city. I would like to come back to the research we have seen. It tells broadly about donors, but the communities which survived occupation and which are now under the shell of the Russians, they know clearly that different donors have different approaches. It is one case when you are work with humanitarian missions with the program past aid, it is easier. Another case, it's when there is a serious donors project. When from talking about installing Windows in the schools to the activity itself, half a year or even 1 year, like in the project held by UNICEF, it was may pass before real work starts. The donors are investors. They would like to work with private sectors with attraction of local communities. They do assess quite differently the communities they are working with in their approach. So this was not only broadly speaking about the donors, but to differentiate them whom we have to deal with. From our Bucha experience, we are differentiating at once the donors. When you are talking to the donor, you discussed with them, and in 1 month the windows will be there, and it doesn't happen. And it influences the decision of mayor whether to continue cooperating with such donors or no, and also the municipality. So here, we'd like the donors who work with Ukrainian communities with smaller cities would explain in the very start their conditions and would calculate in the very beginning how they see their work, because very frequently when donor comes, he says, tell us what are your needs and we'll tell you our capacity. When we sound They know already, are they ready to invest 50, 100,000 or $500,000? Donors with larger projects, there have been not very many of large donors in Bucha. And Bucha, almost all the donors have been coming to Bucha. We communicated with a lot of donors. As a rule, when they come to Bucha at such a community, they know what projects they would like to implement, but they don't speak up. They wait from the municipality first to hear what they want. And the dialogue is not well going because we cannot see what donor is ready to do. Small cities are different, small towns are different from the large one because the ambassadors of all the key countries have visited Bucha. But there are certain logics that the city with 75,000 population before occupation, and about 90% of this population returned here, or IDPs have come here, so the population is a little bit lower, but more or less the same as before the war. Such a small city has difficulties to build up a relationship with donors like the large cities do. So the coalition of communities should be created. Our neighbors, Irpin, Gostomel, and Borodyanka, all of them passed occupation, but the needs are different. The percentage of damage, of destruction is different, and approaches to organization to management are difficult. The financing goes through the executive council, in other cases through the military and civil administration. So small cities will like have a model how to work directly with a donor. Not always they do have institutional capacity for that. Not always they have been reoriented quickly. Not always do they have English-speaking people in the personnel. We were attracting English language teachers, foreign language teachers, and because they understood goes about long-term cooperation, new realities should be answered. The international department have been created in Bucha. It conducts main communication work with donors. Bucha learns the experience of large cities and also of Mariupol, who is a fragment in direct work with donors through a dedicated, specially created agency and specially created charity funds and NGOs. What we have understood from our own experience and from other cities like Mariupol and Trostanets, we have seen how they work, and also Slavutich town. When you implement a project, or you want a serious implementation of a large project, a separate project manager has to be affixed to this project. It should be all charged on economics or international department or on this dedicated deputy, because a separate project, specific project requires specific and concrete work. Accordingly, when we are talking about what you have discovered in your what you have found in your research, like political instability of communities, the donors working with Ukraine, they are clearly understanding they have this political instability in Ukraine. They are saying directly, we shall work with you either after the great victory, or we are ready to work right now. It doesn't influence the direct cooperation. It influences on building up the relationships. There is no wish of cooperation, but it is acquired non-wish of cooperation. Everybody was happy to receive an assistance and aid on the occupied territories, but the lack of wish appears when you are negotiating, and they have promised you to bring you a water tank. And after documentation, registration, Zoom meetings in 2 months, the company or the organization which promised you this water tank car, this organization answers, you know, Mykolaiv has larger problems, so we sent it to Mykolaiv. Bucha is out of the list already. So this is just a small example. I understand one water tank for Mykolaiv is important, but Mykolaiv, it's little. For Bucha, one water tank car, water tank lorry would be important to connect Bucha with small villages around it, and we were waiting for it. This is just a little example of lack of cooperation. And very often after such an experience, when we spend a lot of time and efforts and we have got nothing because the donor in the very beginning doesn't disclose. We are talking now about a project we shall be able to implement in 6 months or in 1 year only. So be patient and be prepared for that. Our donor doesn't say a project manager should be there and more communication with local authorities should be there. When we are talking about bureaucratization, the humanitarian missions in past aid, there is a minimum of bureaucracy. When we are talking on the long-term cooperation, separate international departments should be set up for the project manager to conduct the communication and all that be documented. We have successful experience of work with partner cities, 16 of them, which has now, most of them are European and Albany in the United States. And for example, the Portuguese city Cascais provided 500,000 euro of funds for recovery of educational entities. 2 educational entities received this aid, in which we translated all the documentation into English. If you don't have a translator, it is a large volume of work. We have corresponded a lot of time. Half a year passed before that money have come to the accounts of a city council. I wouldn't say it's bureaucratization. The donors should be communicated, should be informed directly what could be the obstacles in the process. We agreed with the donors after this first experience to calculate and to discuss time and other resources necessary. And we are here talking about the lack of capacity of the workers. The humanitarian missions who are coming to Ukraine, they have experience of work in other countries. They know about it. They do calculate, they consider it, but the municipalities do not know it. They don't include it in their considerations, their calculations. They don't understand. They have to fix the partner they talk with and the problem of communication. We wouldn't understand we are not able to receive direct cash aid. But it has to be communicated to the donors. But we have said them, please send us your project managers for registration of the beneficiaries. Then we'll be able to comply with your requirements. I believe the communities have to be more frank, more sincere with the donors. If the donor comes to you with a wish to implement a project and you have different needs, you have to speak out. Even notwithstanding this language barrier, you have directly tell it to the foreigner. You have to cope with your shyness, and you have to tell to the donor, we have done it. We don't need the used stuff. We have a market, we have a Kyiv nearby. Please redirect those flows of second-hand stuff to other cities. It creates for us logistical problems. We are happy to get all this when it's accumulated here. It's already 1 month and 3 hours after Bucha have renewed an infrastructure and became a full-fledged city with a working economy and the commercial part. After the occupations, there have been 3,000 inhabitants in Bucha. So we relaunched the city from zero. We created a civil organization, Bucha City Development Project. Now this organization has registered as a separate entity. We institutionalized, and this is the Institute for Sustainable Development of communities, because the project managers who have been working in Bucha, they saw that the aid, the help of local project managers who can do the work of city council, which was not budgeted, which is not accounted. Such a work is necessary, and such a team of project managers will simplify and will facilitate the attraction of the money. And we did it as a pilot project in the recent months, but we do believe that to accelerate the solution of problems due to lack of people of personnel and the lack of institutional capacity to work with donors, you can go through project together with a civil society organization and with development agency. Unfortunately, there are restrictions on funds utilization because the funds are passing through treasury. And nevertheless, such organizations are very needed, are very much required. If this city wants to work with donors in the perspective, first of all, you have to outline who will do it. And those people have to be trained how to work with both municipalities and donors and also other foreign partners. For example, if you are working with your brother towns, it is not a donor. There is a little bit different cooperation model. So we agree with all the conclusions of this research. They are truthful, and we are searching for solutions which will allow our communities, our regions who have suffered, have been damaged substantially during the occupation to work with donors with a sustainable perspective and to be peer partners in the cities where they do have personnel which facilitates their work with donors and they adapt the experience they have. We have due to full-scale war. Thank you very much, Mykhailyna. You communicated a lot of things worth considering. I'm noting here that it would be worth for donors to get together and to map their activities, the map of donors who can do what to small cities, and that manual, such a map should be disseminated in small cities. Also, I like the idea of some standardized project which small cities could be proposed by donor community. I believe it's an idea which could work. I invite the next speaker, Aleksandra Sladkova, Deputy Director of the Department for Economic Development of Lviv Municipality. The city through which eventually millions of refugees, IDPs have come, and also humanitarian aid, donors, non-donors, etc. I ask everybody to mute your mics, and I ask Aleksandra Sladkova to switch on your mic and to tell us about Lviv's experience and possible your reflections on today's discussion. Good afternoon. I thank you for your invitation. When I'm hearing what other cities say, we see that we have quite different situation. When we are talking about Lviv and recovery, we have certain distractions from few shellings. Obviously, they are not comparable to the shellings on the cities which are attending this meeting, Bucha and Mykolaiv. And frequently it happens that from the state authorities, we have such an attitude, you have not suffered, so what? You are sitting there quietly, you have no incremental growth of, you have no growth of population. And as a matter of rule, more than 10% growth of population, we didn't have it. So what for do we need it? I have to answer, yes, we need it. And our questions, our issues for investments are not pronounced by anybody. Lviv City was working with donors organizations in a form of loans or loans plus grants for many years already. And we have projects which are ongoing 3, 5 to 7 years. And these projects have their own path. Those have been difficult technological projects, which by now are put under question. If you know about biogas station, about waste processing plant, we are fighting to have them for many years already. The waste processing plant is being ready 98%, same for biogas plant or station, 98% readiness, and it doesn't work. So that is the construction. And what happened with all the European projects? The increase in price from 30 to much more percent. When due to the force majeure, the contractor may refuse continuing work because the project has become suddenly much more expensive and he has no profit in working there. And millions or tens of millions of euros have been invested in those projects, and they are very expensive for us, for Lviv. If those projects are failing, we'll get nothing from that. And the increase in price, then becoming expensive, it is question number one. And the question number two is protection of inhabitants. There are military needs, there are recovery needs. What for do we need projects which are not connected with neither recovery nor military expenses? So the cities and the self-government in the cities are attacked under such a perspective. So it's difficult to explain the inhabitants why we have to continue building the waste processing plants, doesn't matter whatever. Just to explain, we'll lose a lot of money in delay of implementation of this project. Every year we lose a lot of money. We are working mainly with loans, as already mentioned. When there is 50 or 80% of the loan, a project can be added by grant funds, which depend upon the loan. The credit limit of the city is not large, and we have no possibility to get new loans with new units. It's very difficult politically, from political point of view, like internal political processes and other. There are some cities where the mayor and the deputies are unanimous, are together. In Lviv, we have a situation when with all the decisions, we have a very hard and heavy discussion to take any solution, especially for complicated, for difficult projects. Technologically complicated, complex. And people don't understand why cannot we for 20 years more just to bring the waste to the polygons? As regards the state program, we encounter the situation, if you are a little bit ahead on certain process, there are no state programs, or they have been developed just to tick them. And they are based on older technologies. There are no regional plans. Same way, due to the very restricted financial possibilities of the city, there is a problem of inadequate assessment of the project in the start. It's very difficult before launching a project to say it will really cost 80 million euro. It's too a lot of money for the city budget, and the loans should be returned, should be repaid, and every person measures a loan as a personal one regards different loans as for individual or as for the city. Individual loan is something a person would earn on later on, and for a city, the loan would mean modernization. Every year of flex of modernization is connected to that. We spent a lot of energy resources we could not spend if the project would already have been implemented. With such very narrow, limited crediting capacities when the state authorities are not participating, it's very difficult for the city to stay one-on-one, face-to-face with the donor, because when we are trying to minimize the project, it is found out there are additional problems, and the project has to be added. The equipment under the project should be connected to the already available equipment in the city, which earlier seemed to be normal, but now the technology says it should be updated as well, and you have to invest other 10 to 15 million euro. Where have we to take that money? In the presentation, and the project for water supply and sewage of Lviv city was mentioned under as failure at one. Yesterday, we discussed this project with the organizers this meeting. It's a very interesting case. It is a bright example of how, when it was the last example when certain project in the city at the level of municipal enterprise, in this case, the water supply, water canal, water supply enterprise was financed from the state budget, and the loan was repaid by the state, and the guarantee, the state was the guarantee, and the state budget was the guarantee. And actually, if you look from the point of view of the city, this project is not a failure. It is one of the most important projects for us for the recent 30 years, because this project allowed us to implement two very important issues. For 24 hours a day water supply, and if in my childhood, I remember water was supplied from 6 in the morning, 9 in the evening, no water in other times. So what tourism could be there, basically, in the city when the water was supplied 6 to 9 in the morning? What could we explain to anybody? Accordingly, when thanks to this project, we managed to arrange for a 24 hours a day water supply in the city, it gave incredible possibilities for further city development. Whatever could be there, the state can be proud of such investments. Second, there have been pumps substituted or replaced, which were pumping water on the sewage facilities, and the older pumps have been very energy inefficient, and the enterprise prepared the replacement of these pumps. But the question, why the project was considered a failure? It was considered a failure by the state authorities because it was conducted 2003 to 2007, before our actual mayor came to power. He is already 4 cadence in the mayorship. He began to stay the power from 2006, and also the project started at the time when presidents were changing. 2004, everybody remembers the Orange Revolution, etc. At the level of state authorities, there have been perception of that water supply tariffs were to be changed, and in 2003 they wanted to change it, but in 2006 and 2007 the cities were prevented from raise water supply tariffs. So that is how the water company became a loss company, unprofitable company. It is a state investment in any case, and the water company has to maintain itself and give profit. It didn't happen due to the tariffs were not raised, and there have been some other reasons, but the tariff was main one. So this project could not be assessed as a failure, because if the state has a goal for the project to be self-repayable, it didn't happen. But we are very thankful for that project, for the implementation of this project. But it was the last state-funded project. Before Euro 2012, all the projects were financed through state enterprises. Now the city has to work directly with donors. We learned how to do it, but our financial capacities, it's not a secret. The modern world changed a lot. We want to join the European Union. It means 100% huge system. We have to have certain indicators on energy consumption, energy efficiency, and environmental pollution. With the monies we do have, EBRD and EIB would be happy to give us a loan with 50% grant funding, but we cannot allow ourselves to do so within the city capacities. Because we have exhausted our capacities and we are in such a deadlock situation. Any case, we shall continue to finalize the projects, to put them into operation. In any case, the waste processing plant will be there. But under this situation, it requires huge efforts from us. Other cities said Mykolaiv refused. They will not work with funds because bureaucratically it's very difficult. It's a very smart idea. We also tried to split certain projects on the pipes, transformers, etc., to see whether we can have such equipment, not money. But there are also warranties for the equipment, is supplier's warranty. The equipment is very specific, very individually produced, customized. So we may not use this form of project. Also, Mykhailyna mentioned about City Development Institute. The first City Development Institute was created in Lviv in 2009. Before that, there was another civil society organization. We have been working with soft projects first. I started to work with 12 years ago. It was going about transparency, about accountability. But at certain points, it switched to large investments. But we are trying to cope ourselves. It becomes more difficult every day under the circumstances we have. Although these circumstances are not to compare with what other cities have now. So the state has to take into account this difference. The state has to take into account this drastically different circumstances of different cities, each of which has its own needs. Thank you. Thank you, Aleksandra. We'll take this tragic story about the Lviv water canal, water enterprise. It happened some past time ago, but it is very topical now because there is a discussion what project could be invested to, what could not be invested because the country is in the war. So it is an example of how it's served for tourism boom in Lviv. Also a point about inadequate assessment of the project in the start. Ira Jose listened for us and I have seen a boast from her on that in the global experience there are examples when, for example, the American donor under-assessed the project and as a result, they have did 70% less for twice as much as money. Differently from the initial assessment, it happens. I see in the chat now 2 posts which confirm that Mykolaiv does everything correctly, receiving in-kind assistance, not in money. I understand it is a good idea not only for Mykolaiv, but many other cities also are doing so. It works in Ukraine very well now. That is what about in-kind help and different procedures of donors, different models of cooperation, what the donors can provide or cannot provide. I would like to ask Artem Shevalev, who is the Deputy Executive Director of Ukraine in EBRD, and he has own opinions and views on absorption capacity of Ukrainian cities. Thank you, Artem, for joining us. Thank you, Maria. I welcome everybody. I want to congratulate everybody with the Day of Ukrainian flag. And I want to express sincere gratitude to those cities which are living under Russian shelling every day. I have my sincere respect to you. Few comments. First of all, talking about donors and loans funds. There are very interesting comments in the chat, but I believe we have to at once say that to a certain extent, there is no difference from the point of view of donor or creditor. There is few difference. The requirements for the quality of documents and projects preparation are very similar. Obviously, there are donors who are more relaxed about those requirements, but we are talking here about the most typical situation. We are talking about some international civil society organizations or brother cities which allocate certain grant funding. I would consider it rather like a some separate cases, not to do a rule from that. It leads me to the main opinion, main thought, which was clearly shown in the research going about the absorption capacity, meaning the capacity to absorb funds. I interpret it very broadly, and the issue of institutional capacity, which was put in the presentation, mentioned in the presentation, but it was under number 4 or 5 in priority. Really, when talking, and it concerns not only municipal projects, it concerns also state level projects, meaning those large investments which are needed now in the energy sector, in the transport sector, are encountering absolutely similar problems. We are talking on that Ukraine is missing the specialists, the cadre who would be able to formulate high quality project requests and then be able to work with donors and investors to implement those projects. We are talking about that the deficit of these cadre is from the side of local authorities, both, and on the side of our Ministry of Finances and the Ministry of Recovery and the military oblast administrations as well. People are tired physically, people are missing. Many people left abroad. There's an interesting phenomenon. Many countries have been lost because they passed to the other side of barricades, not to the Russia, God save from it, but to the side of donors. We see the situation when the specialists who have been working recently with international I-Fi projects, they have got serious experience and they have been working in reform support projects which EBRD and other financial institutions have launched in a number of ministries. That people pass to work to other donor organizations, like you said, and the like. Why so? Because the salary are a little bit higher there. Maybe the working place was more interesting. We are losing people, even those who we have already trained. Currently, a very active work with the Ministry of Recovery and with the government on goals to start such an office for preparation of projects. That is a conventional working name, but it goes exactly about recruiting to train and continue to systemically train the specialists who will prepare the projects or pre-project requests and then work on the implementation of the projects for the ministries and large state projects and for local authorities as well. It's a very clear direction of work on increasing the number of such people. We hope that in September, together with Kubrakov's team, I mean EBRD and the World Bank and other IFIs, will be able to start recruiting people for to support those processes. On the first stage, I believe it will concern more the state projects, but I hope that very quickly from that we'll switch to support the local authorities as well. And a little comment about type standard projects. We discussed it during the interview, Maria. The projects are very rarely unique. If there is a unique project, there is some unique component, but the bulk of it is the basic calculations and how it all is matching the local budget and how it works under the condition of our municipal companies. All those calculations are typical type standard ones and those that can be prepared to provide access to it for all the municipalities. I would like just to comment that eventually the local authorities, it would be worse for them sometimes, notwithstanding the political differences, to get together and try to centralize the process. We have the Association of Cities or of Towns, and we have the alike platforms which would enable the creation of a single office or a single team of specialists who would be able to prepare such standard building blocks for the project. As regards the realization of the project, I'm not talking here about the critical projects which have to be implemented already now regarding the infrastructural facilities destroyed by the Russians. Talking about more serious, more solid, not to forget about affordability of these services problem. I have no answer to that. This is an open question. What shall we do the next 2 to 3 to 4 years when Ukraine will still suffer the consequences of war and the economic growth will be a difficult task, and we shall have to invest into the large municipal investment projects which have to be commercial, basically. And here the local authorities have to somehow find an answer to this question. How will they talk to the voters, not only their citizens, but also the regions say, dear, oh, there will be a new water pipeline or a new electrical and heating plant, but the tariffs will be market tariffs for the services supplied from them. And I know how to cope, how to pass this problem. It goes about the political will mentioned in the research. As regards a point which was not highlighted in the presentation, and to a certain extent it is a question to our central authority, is the issue of a local component. Ukrainian economic recovery post-war has to be based upon our Ukrainian companies, enterprises. First of all, obviously there will be many contractors involved, engaged from the international partners, but Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian suppliers have to be a priority because it will be a pledge of that we shall be able to create jobs, to create the tax base, and we will be able to create this economic recovery. And here we come to a very difficult question, because there are many large donors like EBRD or World Bank. They do operate they have very strict requirements for procurement policy, and the preference for local component is a problem, is a big problem. I think that obviously the war and post-war recovery is an argument which is enhancing our position, but it will be reasonable for the government to promote very actively this element as well. The back side of the local component is corruption, but we put it out of this discussion now. It will be dealt with by other reforms, our reforms. The grant and loan funds, this issue is related, disconnected also with the tariffs and how to repay the loans. It is named blend financing. And frankly speaking, blended financing. The cities and the ministers in charge of the project have to promote very actively such a blended financing. What EBRD did once upon a time through FIP program, when the value of the project was split into the loan part or credit part and the grant part. And sometimes the grant part was even larger than the loan part. That is how the burden on the local budget was reduced. At the same time, the project was implementable. I would focus on that. I will wrap up where I started, talking about the issue of coordination between local and central authorities. The projects on the ground in the towns almost never could be implemented without engagement of the relevant ministries and departments when we are talking about more or less significant infrastructure or recovery projects. And here we do have two aspects. First one, institutional capacity has to be built upon not only in the municipalities, but also in the ministries, because the cadre losses in the ministries are there as well, and they have to be coped with on one side. On another side, it is an issue of a policy. I wouldn't like now to comment specifically, but the governmental support for the projects on the ground has to be a universal one. And when the governmental project of the projects on the ground couldn't be transformed into the tool for political preferences or non-preferences. So I believe the cooperation in the building up the institutional capacity between municipalities and the central authority will allow to avoid such preferences and to create more universal approach to implementation of the projects. Thank you. Thank you, Artem. I like the idea on that the government has to talk to the donors in aiding the component on localization on one hand. On the other hand, the government has to be fighting corruption in those local components. It's a very important approach. Otherwise, we lose a very important tool. I thank everybody who is writing in the chat. I am split between the speakers and the chat. There is a lot of interesting questions. We have left very little time. Unfortunately, we gave more time to speakers and we have less time for Q&A. So I will ask two questions to all cities speakers to answer in turn. After that, if time will be left, Artem would comment assessment on cash year and the Big Four. There is a question in the chat, you can read it. I have blitz questions to the representatives of the city. The first question, how do you work with civil society organization? Are you satisfied with that work? Is it useful for you? What exactly is useful? What is not useful? What is just hindering? Just 3 minutes, each one, your experience. Let us start with Mykhailyna. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you. Can you repeat the question, please? The question is, we have very few time left, so we have 2 blitz questions to each of the cities. Your positive and negative experience of cooperation with civil society organizations and how they can be useful to the cities in this work for attraction of investments. What is hindering? May I ask? May I answer? We have a big problem with that. We are attracting the SCOs and the international organizations who are conducting their work for a very long time. They have to learn to study some process to analyze, and it takes a lot of time. And it influences the project's timeline. As regards the engagement of SCOs in our cities, they are involved in all the processes. When preparing master plan, when preparing certain areas, under the mayor, the branch councils have been created, and we do talk with the relevant experts, including the business. I would like to add very briefly about institutional capacity. It is a great problem for all. When the borders will open, a huge amount of people who know English will leave Ukraine. Those who would like to fight here a long time, better go abroad and to get everything at once there. We encounter now the situation on that the official has to be poor and ugly today. If you are beautiful, okay, let it be, but you have to be poor. When we are seeing the salary of our public officers, it is one of the issues we are discussing when creating the project office in Mykolaiv city, which will be financed by Danish government. So we would hire good people with knowledge, not the specialists who will experiment in Mykolaiv with their knowledge. So basically, there are large problems, they will remain, and they will be similar for all the cities. Talking about localization component, yes, the state has to create special, separate circumstances or special conditions, different conditions in different cities. The risks in Mykolaiv and in Lviv are different. Talking about business development in those 2 cities, it will be different after all for tens of years. So special economic areas, special economic tools should be created, special possibilities, opportunities for these post-war territories you want to recover. After we'll get those tools, the support by the state of those internal and external investors should be there for them to help invest exactly in those areas, in those regions, to motivate them. Otherwise, we'll get the poor areas will become poorer and the rich areas will become richer, and there will be relevant migration. Thank you very much. There have been a lot of good thoughts about that the regions are very similar and we have to change something in our thinking, in our mentality. We are talking about Big Bang recovery, but we are reducing to just we are talking about green recovery, green building, but in fact, we don't change our mentality And we put into the future what we have in the past. It is not buy a big belt and copying the practices of different territories without taking into account cultural differences in Ukraine. It is worse to copy standard project, maybe just to differentiate them in different territories. There's nothing difficult in that. Thank you, Alexander, very much. Mykhailyna, please. I hope you are hearing me well. Yes, we hear you. It's very well the city mayor answered this question because I came to city mayor position before the full-scale invasion from civil society sector. I understand how the municipalities can work with civil society organizations, but the fear of mayors consists in what the mayor of Mykolaiv now said. The civil society organizations, when coming to municipalities, they frequently don't understand the specificity of the, they don't know internal procedures, they don't stick to what they are talking. For mayors, they haven't become partners, having experience of working with CSOs, talking about sustainability of partnership. When we launched the Phil Office project, what was our main function? A CSO comes with their language, proposing some services to the city council. We understand social policy department or education department are not able to stick those requirements due to different reasons. And the project offices have helped CEOs to adapt their project under the requirements of local self-government. That is how in many projects realized since January to June, we have moved with the rate, with the speed, the civil society could move to represent a donor. We have been partners and we have implemented 4 partnership projects. The Partnership for Strong Ukraine, which was mentioned in the chat, a pool of 6 embassies of leading countries. All the 4 projects have been successfully implemented in helped by the local council with minimum engagement, and they have brought a lot of use to the community. So the civil community, SCOs, when working with CSOs, when working with the municipalities, have to think about this work. Mayors are easy to convince if the project serves really to the citizen. It is easy to implement it. If we pass this first stage and if we build up the trust between the mayor, deputies, and the heads of structural departments and what the CSO wants. But many CSOs cannot pass this first stage, and instead of cooperation and partnership, confrontation is there. So mayors also have to be explained how SCOs should be engaged, how to cooperate with civil society. Accordingly, the CSOs have to understand that the state procedures there when working with grants and with donors are very much different. Even such issues expertise for a city mayor will be state expertise for project of state financing. For SCO, for CSO, it would be when you get up some experts and have the collective opinion. So the language is different. Many projects could have been organized if there would be more people with experience of municipal state management in the CSOs. Thank you very much for this very important words. We are communicating with some civil society organizations who are engaged in the projects for recovery of schools in the Ivankiv community. They are renewing residential facilities, and everybody names that the trust and good communication would be a cornerstone for success. And Sasha Sladkova, if you have something to say about this, of your experience of working with CSOs, please tell us. And that will be the last intervention today. Thank you. It is an interesting question. I would split civil society organization on professional ones who have expertise, sometimes larger in certain areas than local government and authorities, even as dedicated department. It's a political organization. We had a boom of political CSOs who duplicated city processes, but they have been underrepresented in the previous cadence of the city council. In this council, it's much more difficult to take decisions. We have a lot of different parties with their political interests, but all those SCOs now don't exist anymore. Now the process is made through the parties and different interest groups in the city council, not in the administration. As regards successful experience, I would say our civil society organizations are the professional ones, having a big expertise. They do help the city to close some gaps in the policy. For example, when building the waste processing plant, all the forces go there. At the same time, civil society organizations like Lviv conducts research on process, on waste forming, waste generation. They are very needed for us, but they say we could use more their efforts and their knowledge. Coming back to donors issue, we had a problem of integration in the central part of the city, which was financed by GIZ. When they launched an office, they were not waiting for our institutional capacity to implement the projects on restoration and integrated development, but they did a project office where 25 persons worked, and in 10 years of this project office working in Lviv, it changed. Lviv changed a lot. It was not only money, it was a project office which was teaching us. This project is already completed, but the processes have passed to another quality already. So such an experience when there is a project office, not to talk about salaries of the people, including GIZ, it is very successful experience. I would like such examples to be more because we are learning a lot from such international projects. Thank you. Thank you very much, Aleksandra. I thank all the speakers, to Mykhailyna, to Oleksandr, to Artem. Today there have been very lively discussion, and we have materials to 3 other discussions of a type. By the way, those who are listening to you, you may write to our email if you want to repeat an event oriented on local problems, on absorption capacity locally. We can talk about it. We can organize another panel like this. Please write us about this to the relevant address. And after having your opinion, we may repeat. We may organize another event. For me, it was not sufficient. I congratulate everybody with Flags Day. Let today's and tomorrow's day be quiet and peaceful all over Ukraine, in Bucha, Lviv, and Mykolaiv as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining.